take my hand, come with me, take your time, but don't you see.
والصلاة والسلام على النبي المصطفى وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن اتبعه وبعد. Alhamdulillah, blessed scholars, asatidas, ladies and gentlemen, it is with utmost gratitude and humility that we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for bestowing upon us the blessings of time, health, and the participation of faith to be gathered here for this evening's lecture. Today's lecture entitled Traditional Islam, what does it mean? In a world that is fast evolving, the human race has seemingly fallen into two extremes: the obsession with all things futuristic, or the increasingly frantic clamor for the nostalgic past. Today, the term traditional Islam is judged by these two extremes. With that, it is pertinent for us to be enlightened with what does it mean by traditional Islam. Our speaker tonight, Shaykh Ahmed Muhammad Saad Al-Malki Al-Azhari Al-Hassani, graduate with an honorary degree in Islamic Studies in English from Al-Azhar University. The Shaykh is currently pursuing his PhD at Birmingham University. Shaykh Ahmed has benefited tremendously from the traditional Islamic sciences from teachers such as his father, his late father, Shaykh Muhammad Saad Habib Abu Bakr Al-Adani bin Ali Al-Mashhur, and the former Grand Mufti of Egypt, Shaykh Ali Jum'ah. Without further ado, we would like to invite Shaykh Ahmed Saad to present his lecture. Shaykh, please.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين. اللهم انشر علينا رحمتك وابسط علينا حكمتك وافتح علينا فتوح العارفين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. It's with great pleasure that I have this opportunity to speak to all of you under the banner of our emerging institute, an organization here in Singapore, Ihsan Institute, which is a blessed branch of the Ihsan Institute UK that has started just below 10 years ago. And it is of a privilege that I come to Singapore as well after such a long time, more than a year. And also it gives me privilege that this our institution is carrying out this series of events in collaboration with the Society of Religious Teachers and Islamic Religion Scholars, known as PERGAS. So I don't know what does that stand for in Malay language, so excuse my ignorance. Today's talk is about traditional Islam. And I will have to make a disclaimer because this topic could be quite sensitive to some and could be quite interesting to some. Those who want to fish in troubled water as much as those who want to feel happy about revenge looking at other Muslims. As you will see in the course of this talk is not a talk of categorizing Muslims into groups and saying who is right and who is wrong. It is just a kind of plowing, spiritually plowing in our past and creating a contrast between what Islam used to be and how what's the shape of Islam in our modern society. It might sound a bit academic and dry for some, so excuse that. I promise this is possibly the only dry topic, or the least dry, the most dry topic in this whole series. And I would like to start with, if we go a few hundred years ago, with a man called Marshall Hodgson, who was a Quaker, a historian, a great historian, professor of history in the University of Chicago. He wrote 3 volumes book on Islam called The Venture of Islam. Very, very advisable and very brilliant work on history. And he makes some interesting remarks, and he coins his own vocabulary in describing the Islam as a religion, an Islamicate, or what we call the Caliphate, Islamicate, as the land of Islam. And he says essentially that a lot of people live in the nostalgia that we have to return to the Islamicate, but they make themselves feel that it is Islam, and we have to make the difference in order to save ourselves from a lot of deception. Anyway, Marshall Hodgson says that in the 16th century of our era, a visitor from Mars might well have supposed that human world was on the verge of becoming a Muslim. If someone was to walk on Earth from anywhere between the Atlas Mountains to the borders of China or even beyond, they would think that the world is on the verge of becoming a Muslim, because Muslims were the most powerful civilization, and they were carrying together, more importantly, they were carrying together different civilizations that blended in within what we call the Muslim civilization. We should not forget that after in the 6th century Hijri, the Mughals who came to invade Baghdad, and they destroyed it, and they threw at least 1/3 of the heritage of human race in the rivers of Baghdad, to the level that the rivers became dark from the amount of ink. These Mughals, not long time after, they themselves fell a victim. So even though they invaded the land of Islam, Islam invaded their hearts. So they became Muslims, regardless of the shape of that Islam, but these individuals have fallen into Islam. We should not also forget that as soon as Islam was kicked out, was expelled from the land of Andalusia, or Spain, Muslim Spain, in 1492, it was not long after that Istanbul has fallen, or Constantinople has fallen into the hands of the Ottomans. So at that time, Islam was kind of in pulling and tugging in both sides of the world. But what has happened in this very beautiful and optimistic image of the world becoming a Muslim, or coming to the verge of Islam, something happened that reversed the course of history and took another direction. We can simply say that this thing that happened is what people call today that Europe has started its dawn. The French Revolution and the Industrial Revolution in England and the French Revolution in France came. One was calling for political reshaping of Europe, another was calling for the economic reshaping of Europe, and that has led also, following all of these, has led to a long exploration of different parts of the world, including this part of the world. So what followed was what we call colonialism, and the Muslim world retarded to take a very back seat in the process or the caravan of humanity. We are not going into the details of what happened, but what we have to have a look at is just a glimpse at the world of tradition. In fact, this event or these events have broken what is called the tradition from what we call modernity. We live in the modern world today. So the tradition, the world of tradition, known sometimes in Europe as medieval ages, we know it as the traditional world in the Muslim world, has broken from the modern world. And whether we are now in post-modern world or we are in continuation of the modern world, that's a very, very huge debate in the academy. The rift between tradition and the modern world has only gone bigger, to the level that if someone wants to take a sneak peek into the traditional world, they will find it very, very strange and very alien to them. We can understand that many people who call to reapply what used to live in the traditional world in the world today, they have no clue about it because the gap is so huge. Anyway, we will try to take a peek in order to prepare ourselves for the appreciation of what I'm going to say after. In that traditional world, there was a web of rules and recommendations that shaded up into law at the legal level and into practices and rituals of everyday life with no border between the two. Very quickly, if you look at Muslims today, most of the questions Muslims pose today are to do with their identity conflict. What am I? As a family, what are we? I'm not talking about Muslims existing in a non-Muslim context only, I'm talking about Muslims existing in a globalized context, which applies to Muslim world and beyond. So Muslims today, most of their questions is, I go to the bank, can I deal with that? Can I do this? I want to buy a house. From the question of buying a car, all the way to the question of buying a house, all the way to the question of going, taking medical insurance, all the way to loads and loads of questions. When it comes to education, shall I send my children to university and they have to have a student loan, or shall I buy a house with mortgage and pay interest? How shall I conduct myself in public and almost now in private? So that itself gives us a glimpse that that world there was no identity conflict. Muslims just lived. They did not have the challenge of asking themselves these simple questions, actually the very complicated questions that we ask on a day-to-day basis. The second thing, which is very, very crucial and important, the unelected, self-regenerating, powerful class of scholars had an influential role in everyday life and were highly respected. And I would like to pose with each and every word in this statement that scholars have always been known as unelected class. But we live at a time where scholars in many places are elected class. Whether applied by a government or applied by another individual or applied by an institution, that puts a big question. I'm not doubting anyone, but the masses will put big question about the loyalty and the conflict of interest of those scholars. Recently, I was presenting an academic paper in an institution in Birmingham, and one of the interesting papers that were presented by a scholar from the Shia school was how the khums money is money that is given to the students of knowledge and the SAAD and the Shia school given to scholars. How could the Shia scholars resolve the conflict of interest between taking the money from the masses and being fair in giving their opinions to the masses? If someone pays you, there is conflict of interest. How free you will be to say to them what they don't want to hear. So the unelected, we are talking about a world that had completely different dynamics. Scholarship was unelected, and it was a self-regenerating institution, which means that the scholars never needed to apply for funds, they never needed to beg for money, they never needed to, they were not afraid, and at the same time the masses could not accuse them of siding with any group because of anything. And it was a powerful class in the society. So people used to associate respect, immense respect with the scholars. Again, we live at a world where scholars are shattered on social media by every Tom, Dick and Harry, as they say in England. Everyone jumps up and down when a scholar says something that they are not familiar with, accusing the scholar of being with this person or with that person, or serving this agenda, or being ruthless, or being merciless, or anything. What has happened over the past few centuries is, and technically the past 50, 60 years, is the status of scholars and their existence in the public society has been broken down. That now the awam carry no awe and respect that they used to carry for the scholars. And I'm not talking, by the way, about you meeting a sheikh in the street here in Singapore and you kissing their hand. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when you disagree with the scholar in their opinion. How quick you will jump and start categorizing this scholar and putting him in the corner. And so we had a world that's completely different. It had an influential role. The scholars had influential role in daily life and were highly respected. In fact, the scholars at a certain point, they were the class that balanced that balanced the power between the government and the masses. Sheikh Ahmed al-Dardir rahmatullah alayh, when people had a difference of opinion with the government of Egypt, with the wali of Egypt, they ran to Sheikh Ahmed al-Dardir to help them get back their salaries and wages from the government. And he didn't do anything. He just went to the hakim and he said, you paid them the wages. This is full. And the hakim paid that. So we can actually just imagine this position of scholars and compare it to today. At the level of arts, we used to live in a world where calligraphy would have prestige as an art form. Representational arts, as opposed to abstract or decorative, would be rare unless in illuminated books. Now we live in a world that is full of visuality. Calligraphy is not appreciated. Craftsmanship is not appreciated. Doing things with hands is not appreciated. So what is happening is we have moved from appreciation of individual talent that takes time to build, to succumbing into the massive products of factories, things that look like genuine, but in reality they're not genuine. And with that, the taste of people itself has gone down. And I'm mentioning this specifically because that has expanded into other areas of knowledge as well. So we are no more appreciating what does it mean to study for 20 years or 30 years or 40 years or 50 years. We don't really appreciate that. We do not even appreciate that process of producing scholarship. Genuine scholarship is something that takes time. So what happens, many of our young people want to be quickly fried and presented to the public. Spoken and written word would be honored. But nowadays, what is honored? Images. Right? Images. We live in a world that celebrates images. So you can just imagine that when you listen to something or when you read something that has an impact on you as an individual and has an impact on your choices and also has an impact on your processing of information. But when it is images, they say another yasbiqu al-khabar. The eyes always perceive the air. You always see things quicker than you hear them. Orthodoxy and heterodoxy, and I mean by orthodoxy here, traditionally, what we call traditional Islam. But by heterodoxy, there was a lot of heterodox groups in the history of Islam. We had the Mu'tazila, for example, the Muslim rationalists, or we can call them the Muslim apologetics, who did not die. Their ideas are still alive. They just took a new shape. But they're presenting themselves in every philosophical arena, in the academy and outside. But orthodoxy and heterodoxy both belong to the one tree of tradition. Yes, there was discussions and debates, but there was no excommunication. But there was no categorization. And all the debates that happened within the area that was suitable for them, i.e. the area of scholarship. You can just imagine that the debates in the most difficult and detailed and sophisticated areas of knowledge today are presented to the masses. So everyone has a say about them, everyone has a contribution, and everyone says who knows and who does not know will have to have a say. So orthodoxy and heterodoxy both belong to the one tree of tradition, and scholarly discussion remain scholarly. Now with these 5 points, you can just vision and imagine what world we live in this day. All of a sudden what has happened, this tradition was thrown away. And I'm quoting Sheikh Hamza Yusuf here in his introduction to a beautiful and amazing book called The Art of Persuasion, which is a book that existed many years before, but they reprinted it as part of the Zaytuna curriculum. It's by Scott Kreider. He says at the beginning of the book, as an introduction, he didn't write the book, he says a wise society will strive to preserve its tradition. So if someone asks, what is the talk about tradition? Why? Why is that relevant? A wise society will always strive to preserve its tradition and cultural legacies that have stood the test of time. So this is one thing, that tradition have stood the test of time. Whatever Islam we have developed in the last 200 years or 100 years or 50 years, it has just been alive for 200 years. We have another Islam that has been living for another 1200 years. And if you have tried a specific cassette or a computer or something for a long time, if you build a relationship with a barber for a very long time, he was your barber and he was the barber of your father and your grandfather, you would be very skeptic to try a new one. We say in Egypt, the one you know is better than the one you do not know. And they say in English, better the devil you know. Right? So better the human being you know. So he says that these legacies have stood the test of time. Tradition worth keeping demands of us that we pass along the wisdom of our cultural inheritance and the foundations of our intellectual, spiritual and moral health. In fact, tradition indicates, it's a compass that tells us, it's an indication, it tells us that we had moral health, that we had spiritual health, that we had intellectual health. As we will see, the intellectual health that is displayed in accepting difference of opinion, the intellectual health that is appreciated or reflected in appreciating the long time it takes to make scholarship, the intellectual health and the spiritual health that looks at the process of education, not just as a process of feeding people some nuggets of knowledge, but actually a process of transformation. So he says, modern culture has a worrisome tendency to trade old lamps for new, to discard precious heirlooms for newfangled ideas and artifacts. But while we are busy jettisoning the worst of our cultural past, as much as we need to look at the positive things and remove the negative things from our past, we should also understand, we should have the desire to conserve the best of it. Ought to be foremost in our hearts and minds. So this is a justification. Why would a tradition be needed? Now, why again? Give me another reason why tradition is to be needed. Those who attended the talk before yesterday, the day before yesterday, I mentioned and I referred to this book, an English classic by C.S. Lewis. It's 31 letters written at the tongue of a devil, a big devil, called Screw Tape, to his nephew, the little one, Woodworm, where Screw Tape is teaching the little one how should he handle the victim, human being, and mislead him and play around with his mind like we play football, and how he should try his best to keep him away from the enemy, that's God, and take him into the dungeons of confusion. So Screw Tape says in one of his letters, interestingly, selling ignorance has become the characteristic of our time. He says, give a man grand idea. Give anyone a grand idea, general idea, that he knows it all, and that everything he happens to have picked in casual talk and reading is the result of his modern investigation. Basically, make the masses believe that they know it. And with a little word from here and from there that possibly they picked watching a debate on social media or reading a book, just give them the impression that they have investigated enough to be scholars on their own. So what is traditional Islam then? What is that thing that we're actually missing? In this lecture, I am not promising that I'm going to talk about how to make a traditional scholar. But I will share with you some thoughts about why traditional Islam is a better candidate to lead our intellectual life today. One, traditional Islam has known for its prestigious religious syntheses. In a book called God and Logic in Islam by John Woolbridge, he talks extensively about the diversity and the sophistication of Islamic tradition. The modern adherents of religion today, many Muslims today, just face us with a very fervent call to go to the textual roots of Islam, which is great, but bypassing the process of religious synthesis, of how to digest and summarize and expand and discuss and challenge the ideas that are in these texts. That religious synthesis leads to neglecting a rich, valid and productive tradition. Scholars wrote for a purpose. They wrote to expand something that is short, or to shorten something that is expanded, or to reorder something that is not ordered, or to complete something that's not complete, or to fix something that is full of mistakes or has some mistakes, or to invent a new topic of knowledge, an area of knowledge that's never been discussed before. They wrote what we call shuruh, commentaries, and hawashis, glosses, or marginalias. And in all of this, what they did is they discussed the ideas by highlighting the blind spots the original author did not manage to notice. So when an idea comes to us today from the tradition, we are sure that this idea has been given so many stamps of quality control through other scholars who engaged with this idea. While a novice idea that has just been produced recently hasn't enjoyed that much discussion and that much debate, and therefore it is like a medicine that hasn't been tested on anyone. So when we try to bypass that rich tradition, what happens? We are bypassing generations of scholars who challenged, discussed and verified. In this meticulous process of preservation, traditional Islam was shaped and formulated. One of my teachers was talking about a call to cancel madhabs. A call which was common in the Muslim world, that we should get rid of the madhabs. Even though madhabs, the different schools of thought, are the living evidence that we had the vitality and the flexibility to accept difference of opinion. I was saying to the brothers yesterday or something like that, I had developed a belief in the recent years that every Muslim should learn fiqh of purification and ibadah, at least according to 2-3 schools of thought. That is like an emergency fiqh. Because you get stuck. Reality is, you definitely get stuck. You get stuck in wudu or in another ibadah, and you want to know, what does the other madhab say? The solution is right next to you, but you can't discover it. So that multiplicity of opinion is there in the tradition. By the way, many traditional scholars are misunderstood when we say we have to stick to a madhab. They're misunderstood. You are rigid. No, I'm not saying you have to stick to a madhab and hate other madhabs. I'm just saying stick to a madhab, master it, learn another madhab, master it, and when you are mastered, then make your own components, put your own things together, and go ahead. You have to stick to one instructor of driving until you are a driver yourself. But if you keep changing different cars and different drivers, you will never learn how to drive. And if you do, it will be a disaster. If you would like to learn how to make a specific medicine, you need to learn first of all the components of different substances and what happens when you put them next to each other. So what happened is that the Islam that grew up in such a rich tradition, this Islam is different from the Islam that we see in social media and newspapers, a fanatical devotion to the arbitrary interpretation of a single text of the Quran. So someone picks up an ayah or a hadith, very odd. In the last 4 or 5 years, people have meticulously, very smartly, unearthed the most controversial texts that you can come across in the tradition. And they discuss them in very public talk shows. I will not name any, because that's kind of promotion. But they were discussed by people and were like, no, this Islam is ugly. Of course, this Islam is ugly. But remember that flies only land on things that are dirty. Why don't you become like a bee and fall only on flowers? Why did you choose this? Shaykh Abdul Fattah Buddha has an amazing saying. I love that saying. He says, اختيار المرء قطعة من عقله. Your choice is part of your reason. Your choice reflects who you are. What do you choose? You know, as much as you look at someone and you say, MashaAllah, this person looks very smart. He always dresses smart. Or you say, you enter into someone's house and you say, MashaAllah, the people of this house, they're really clean. They are very meticulous in their choice of colors and things like that. So by the same token, when you write a book and you choose, it's an indication of what your brain is. Where do you go? What are your sources? Right? So this Islam is different from an Islam that is fanatical. Islam that arbitrarily takes something out of context, preach shrilly and politically too excited throngs at prayer. So what happens, we go to the masajid, we throw something at people, we make them very agitated and very angry and very emotionalized at something that they have no clue about the reality of. Have you heard? No. Have you seen? No. So why are you angry? Oh, someone told me. The Prophet ﷺ says, in the end of times, people will be killed, they don't know why they killed. And others will kill, they don't know why they killed. And you can see people just walking in a procession or a demonstration or anything. Someone was just coming out of Salatul Jum'ah, and then he's shot. He was just there. That Islam is a cooler Islam, is a thoughtful Islam, is an earnest Islam. It's not in secular sense, by the way. You've got to be very, very cautious. It's not cooler in the sense that it is very progressive. And by the way, we're faced with two types of very glittering and bright things. Islam is the religion of stiffness. Well, it's neither that, nor Islam is the religion of openness. Yes, it is open. But openness, you can open your door to a specific degree. But if you take off the door and throw it away, then you good luck. Have good luck. It's a cooler Islam, a thoughtful and earnest one. Not in a secular sense, but in the sense that it's not absolutist. It's not absolutist, and that's the thing. Or without roots. So when it argues with confidence. A second thing about traditional Islam, so traditional Islam calls for respect of scholarly synthesis, which short tracts and untrained minds cannot grasp or appreciate. That traditional scholarly synthesis cannot be appreciated by untrained minds. By the way, this legacy is ignored by both modernists and fundamentalists. The result of this neglect is a plethora of arbitrary personal interpretations of the Quran that only make the masses heated. The second feature of that traditional Islam is that it's a tolerant and inclusive Islam. And we have a contrast between what we call a rich land and an arid thoughts versus a rich land. So here is a quotation. The poverty of much modern Islamic thought compared with the subtlety and richness of the medieval Islamic intellectual tradition points at reclaiming an older and more intellectually rigorous tradition. Look at the works, for example, that were written in fiqh or in a specific, in the last 40 years. And then look at the rigor and the detailed and the meticulous nature of the books that were written by scholars 500 years ago. Look at the types of discussions. Look at the titles here. We are hair splitting. Islam in the last few hundred years is hair splitting Islam. So the topics that are discussed and the themes that are presented and the ahkam. One simple feature of the ahkam, for example, is we have forgotten about makruh and mandub and mubah. For us, things have become what? What? Halal and haram. Right, that's it. Even though Ibn Ashir says أحكام أقسام وحكم الشرع خمسة ترام فرض وندب وكراهة حرام. This is, we have basically reduced human action to a choice between my way or the highway. We have created this false dichotomy between you either this or you either that. Interestingly, we have added a new hukm to the list of the 5, making it 6, and then removing the 3, so we end up with 3. That's called bid'ah. So bid'ah has moved from a category or a title or a name to hukm. Big difference. In addition to the rest of the confusion where we moved areas that should have been discussed in fiqh into areas that should have been discussed in aqidah, and areas of aqidah into fiqh. And the danger thing of this is if you disagree with someone in fiqh, there is a space. You're both Muslims who have different interpretations of Islam. But once you disagree with someone in aqidah, well, there is a space also that you remain both Muslims and you still disagree with each other. But when you take it to the roots of aqaid, then you're saying to the person, you either agree with me or your Islam has a problem. So the poverty of our modern Islamic thought is due to the rigor that existed before that does not exist nowadays. Empiricists, and this is amazing, I like this example. We have empiricists today, Muslims who say, let's take the reality as our reference point, and let's shape Islam in accordance to the reality and neglect anything that was in tradition. So anything that disagrees with the reality from the tradition is declared as un-Islamic and unethical. Remember that the tradition is bigger than our reality. But those empiricists, they're like ants, merely collect things to use them. The rationalists, those who do not look at the tradition, what do? They like spiders. They spin their webs out of themselves. Traditionalists are in the middle. They're like bees. They take what existed and they reproduce their own things. They gather material from flowers and transform them and digest it by power of its own. One interesting feature of that rich land of Islam was that asking questions and disagreeing about their answers was in the heart of Islamic experience. It was not just accepted, it was necessary. It was part of the Islamic mind that we ask questions. We live today in a world where asking questions is seen as a taboo. You cannot ask a question. You cannot question. And even if you ask, there is only one answer. And you are denied the right to give any different answer. Even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created people with different minds and different tastes and different directions of life. So if we compare this tradition, and I've put here like some photos, some interesting photos, but I would like to mention 2 people just to introduce them to you. One is Maimonides. Does anyone know who Maimonides is? Maimonides, or Musa ibn Maimun al-Israeli, was a great Jewish physician and theologian. He was the private physician of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. He grew up in Cordoba. And this man has a book. This man, by the way, is the second most influential figure in Judaism. That's not what I say. You can ask any Jewish rabbi. He's the second most influential figure in Judaism after Musa alayhi salam, after Prophet Musa. Musa ibn Maimun has a book called Dalalatul Ha'irin, Deliverance of the Perplexed, where he puts together 31 proofs of the existence of God that have been taken from the Mu'tazilite school of thinking. And he took that, adapted it, and if we can say, he synchronized it and infused it into the Jewish religion. So modern Judaism, when they try to prove God, they're actually proving it from a Mu'tazili Muslim perspective. The second individual there, Hasda ibn Shaprut, is a very interesting figure as well. Tamim Ansari mentions him in a book called Destiny Disrupted. He mentions that Sancho, King Sancho of Leon, who was a Christian king, he's known as Sancho the Fat because he was obese. He was the king of Leon, and his brother decided to dethrone him and exiled him to the Muslim lands of Spain, which at that time under the king Abdurrahman III. So Abdurrahman III. So King Sancho was exiled to a Muslim land to the Muslim Spain. The Muslim king hosted him and his mother. And he was treated by Hasadai bin Shaprut, who was the private physician of the king, and he was a Jewish. He was a Jewish physician. He treated him from obesity over a course of 2 years, and the king helped him take back his throne. And he was appointed as the king of Lyon. You can look them up. Hasadai bin Shaprut. Hasadai bin Shaprut was not just a physician, he was a diplomat. He was a top diplomat. He was like the Minister of Foreign Affairs of that kingdom. And he was very influential in helping the Jews of a place called Al-Khazar, which is close to Russia. Helped them establishing a state for themselves and a presence for themselves. Because they found that they had a top personality supporting them as a community. And that top personality was not a personality of a Jewish state, he was a personality of a Muslim community state. So asking questions and differing regarding their answers was something that was in the heart of the Islamic experience. Muslim scholars asked all sorts of questions. People only know Ghazali for Ihya Ulumuddin. Al-Ghazali wrote Ihya only later in his life. Al-Ghazali's Ihya is a representation of his spiritual growth, but it's not a representation of his intellectual growth. Al-Ghazali's intellectual growth is manifested in the rest of his books. Al-Iqtisad fi al-I'tiqad, Mizan al-Amal, and the other book, Mahakku al-Nazar, the books on logic, Al-Mahsul, Al-Mustasfa, the books of Usul al-Fiqh. That is what reflects the maturity, the intellectual maturity of Al-Ghazali. In traditional Islamic world, or in traditional Islam, there was a clear educational process. And this is something that we have definitely missed. Nowadays, many of the YouTube pulpits are occupied by speakers whom we know nothing about. Where have they graduated? We don't know. Whom did they study with? We don't know. For how long have they studied? We don't know. What books did they study? We don't know. Were they tested in these books or no? We don't know. Were these books read to the teachers or studied with the teachers? Two different things. I can sit and read a specific text in a couple of days. Just read it to fix my reading. If I have mistakes, it's fixed. But that doesn't mean I can answer questions. It doesn't mean also that I can answer all questions. They say that for seeking a science or a discipline, there are three marahil, there are three phases. There is the marhala of unlocking the texts, and there is a marhala of at-tahqiq, and there is a marhala of at-tadqiq. Unlocking the text is just reading through a book. Difficult words are explained, and you make sure that the person is able to read the sentences correctly so that he makes the links properly. But at-tahqiq is now taking every mas'ala, taking every question, taking every issue that is being discussed and putting together all the discussions around it. And then taking, in the third stage, you take the different masail, and what you do is you return it back to where it came from. I will give you a small example. A lot of people, and I'm sorry if my examples touch on some sensitive issues here. Take, for example, the issue of revolution. Right? A lot of people think that the issue of revolution is a political issue. And I would argue, no, it's a theological issue. Why is it a political issue? People say it's about fixing what's wrong in politics. People are unhappy with how governments are functioning, so they want to fix something, fix the practice of the government. But remember, in the core of Islamic tradition, we believe that any evil and any good both are created by Allah. Those who tried or deceived themselves into believing that God is good were the Mu'tazila, the rationalists. Rationalists could not comprehend that God can create that which is evil. Because to them God has to be good. But remember, we do not base our conception of God on our own understanding. It is on what God tells us about Himself. So what's the first attribute of God? Is it that He is beginningless? Or is it that He is Father, He is able, He is powerful? And if He is powerful, anything that happens in this world, whether it is good or bad, and that He knows it, then it is good, even if it shows to be evil. But once you say, well, this is good and this is evil and this is definitely evil, what you are saying that my mind can discover what is good and what is evil, and can decide that this is evil and it's definitely evil and to continue to be evil. So if so and so has cancer, you say this is evil, but after a few years, when he is treated from that, or they have discovered it early and they treated him from it, chose up to be the best. So what happened, the Mu'tazila, just to cut the long story short, decided that God doesn't create evil. They had good intention, by the way, but good intention is not enough. I'm serious, they had good intention. Not everyone who's good intention makes the right decision, right? So if someone has good intention to treat his son, and his son is in emergency state, and he had like closed the door on his thumb or something, so he decided, in order to stop him from bleeding, I will just cut his thumb. Later on he takes him to hospital and they say, we could have fixed it. So he had a good intention, but he rushed into it. Anyway, the Mu'tazila developed that into a theological debate and into a theological particle of their thoughts, that God does not create what is evil. He only creates what is good. Therefore, if there is any evil in the world, it is made by humans. And since it's made by humans, we as the ummah of goodness, we have a duty to fix that which is evil around us, whether it is committed by individuals or committed by governments. So at the level of governments, they justified revolution. And at the level of individuals, they justified what we call al-amr bil-ma'ruf wal-nahy 'anil munkar, commanding that which is good and forbidding that which is evil. And from these two statements, or that main statement, the Mu'tazila were the most liberal Muslims you can think about. They were rationalists. Daesh are the most rigid Muslims you can think about, right? But Daesh took that statement of Mu'tazila and they are the ones who applied it to the letter. It is very interesting, brothers and sisters, that once you get out of the traditional school and you look at people who hate each other and they throw accusations of kufr at each other, you will find that they share the same theological background. Once you come out of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, you will realize that people are very far, but they are very near. Because remember, extremism is a mentality. Once you're rigid, once you're dark, once you're narrow, it doesn't matter whether you're too liberal who cannot accommodate others, or you're too rigid who cannot accommodate others. Non-accommodation of other views is the same. No difference between someone who wears a hat and someone who wears a short. It doesn't matter. Narrowness is the same. The Prophet ﷺ's main struggle was to tame people and make them balanced. Once you're balanced, you're able to see that the world has multiplicity of opinions. But once you're rigid, it doesn't really matter. So anyway, going back to the clear educational process, the handing down of traditional knowledge flourished in centers of learning. In those days, we knew centers of learning. We knew that if we want to study in North Africa, there are certain centers of learning. Or in Egypt, there are centers of learning. Or in Hijaz, there are centers of learning. Or here in Southeast Asia, there are centers of learning. There were centers of learning that had a clear, balanced curricula and paid attention to what we call the student-teacher relationship. I was in a school this morning and we had a discussion about the relation between students and teacher in modern school system. It's a 45-minute relationship session, after which the teacher doesn't know anything about the student and the student doesn't know anything about the teacher. Simply because the teacher works to secure his living and pay his family bills. So he doesn't see the students as an investment for akhirah, he sees the students as an investment to the end of the month. He sees the families as his potential customers, not the children as his potential inheritors. And a very big gap is between when you see someone as an extension of you, or you see someone as a source of income that will fill your pocket at the end of the month. So knowledge has become a commodity. And once it is a commodity, you have to pack it in small packages. And you're driven by your utilitarian mentality to maximize your benefit from knowledge. So you start charging much to give little. And beyond that, when someone requests more, you will say, your credit is up, I can't give you any more. If you would like, renew your subscription. So in traditional Islam, the relation between a teacher and a student was a relationship of a father and son. Was at someone looking at that student as an extension. It's not a utilitarian relationship. And student-teacher relationship was that a fatherly one. Students looked at their teachers as their fathers. One of our brothers some years ago wrote a book. I didn't even manage to put my hand on that book, of the biographies of the scholars who ended up marrying the daughter of their teachers. Many of them, so many of them, the teacher would choose from his brilliant students the one who deserves his daughter. So he saw him outside the school, or it was such a long time that he could tell how his character is and if he's a good candidate for his own daughter or not. And also there was a clear map of what, how and when to study. SHAYKH, a great educationist, mentions in Sulam al-Ulum, he mentions that they used to pick up on students who are not good for what they want to study. And they would say, you're not good for what you want to study, I advise that you choose another topic. Nowadays, what sends you to a specific specialization is how many A's and A pluses you have got in your GCSE, O level or A level, whatever you call it. But not what you want, or what you're good at, or what you're qualified for. There was a clear map of what to study, and how and when. If I ask any of the brothers who've been studying Arabic for so many years, what is the ladder of teaching Arabic language? They don't have a clue. Or if they have, they don't realize that there are so many ladders varying according to schools, but they all lead to the same destination. You come by MRT or you come by bus, you're coming to the same destination. There was a clear specialization, even though many were encyclopedic. Today, so-and-so is a speaker, an international speaker in Islam. What does that mean? I was laughing about it. You know, once you pass your 40, you become a completely different individual. You become like a young uncle. You know what I like about uncles? With all respect to the uncles here, they become very sarcastic. And it's nice sarcasm. So I was saying to people, subhanAllah, in Islam, speaking is a vice. Nowadays, if you speak a lot, you become a vice president. Right? Or a vice chairman. As long as you're a vice, no problem. Right? What comes out, that doesn't make a big difference. So people have no clear specialization. Nowadays we don't know what has this person specialized in. What is his area of interest? Which is, by the way, nominally used in academia. So in academia they will say, this person has this area of interest. But the unfortunate thing is that it's just a title. It's just a small thing. But we found the ulama of the past were encyclopedic. Take Asyuti, for example. He did not leave a single subject of knowledge apart from mathematics and logic and medicine that he didn't write about. Very prolific. And also, in traditional Islam, there was holisticism. It was a holistic perspective on the role and the nature of man. And I would like to quote from our teacher, Habib Abu Bakr al-Mashhur, who wrote a small treatise, not published unfortunately. It is called الاستعدادات الحثيثة, the urgent preparation لتقوية الأربطة أمام مزاحمة المدرسة الحديثة, to empower the rebuts and the traditional schools in front and in face of the modern school. So he says, from its base to its top, the modern school performs a limited role in the social life. that does not qualify for the desired Islamic level. Producing individuals, producing students, graduates who can handle Islamic life with rigor and with understanding and with depth is not amongst the modern school system at all. This is because it is based on equipping and building the mind with the religious and secular sciences theoretically. Such is an important job, but in the Islamic perspective it needs the moral and educational component. You give the people, you empower their mind, but you don't empower their soul. You empower their mind in a specific area, but you don't empower their mind in another area. No wonder then that many graduates of the modern school who specialize in Islamic studies, they will oppose the traditional scholars. And they will be the very best candidates for what we call modernist Islam and liberal Islam, simply because they will magnify the position of rationality to the level that they will cancel the position of textuality. So there is no text unless it passes through that quality process of the mind. If the mind doesn't justify the text, then the text is thrown away. And by the way, I have no objection to this way of thinking, but I have an objection for someone to claim that he is a Muslim and he adopts this way of thinking, because he's lying to himself. You either submit to a revelation or submit to rationalization. You have the full power to choose between both. You can choose. You can be a completely rationalist and you reject revelation unless it agrees with you, or you accept revelation, but you can't say I accept revelation as the higher authority, and yet you say, but I will twist it to the prerequisites of mind. The mind, you either decide that the mind is the Khalifa of the text, or the text is the Khalifa of the mind. You can't, as they say in English, you can't have the cake and eat it. You can't have both. So this is because it is based on equipping the mind, which is a good job, but in Islamic perspective, it needs moral and educational component. This moral component is missing in all contemporary education structures. This theoretical handling leads both students and scholars to chase gains and utilities and amass knowledge to support institutions, administrations, and other departments regardless of any moral consideration. I possibly shared with the Husna students some years ago the pyramid of Aristotle with different sciences, that there are three categories of sciences. There are sciences that change the self, and there are sciences that change the world, and there are sciences that seek truth. Sciences that seek truth include spirituality and philosophy and religion, while sciences that change the self include medicine, and it includes music. You train yourself on something. Sciences that change the world include engineering, accountancy, knowing how to pave the roads, how to fly a plane. And in the philosophical traditional pedagogy, the bottom is what changes the world. The top is what seeks the truth. But what has happened is we've flipped this pyramid upside down in our modern education. So the top universities and the top departments are the ones that aim at changing the world. They take the most genius students and the brilliant ones. And the remaining, the residue, the intellectual residue of our educational process ends up going to humanities. So if you're studying psychology, that means you didn't do good in your positive. Anyone studying psychology? Or if you're studying, for example, philosophy, you've got nothing else to do in your life except to study philosophy. Or you're studying religion, oh my days. It's even worse. So, this theoretical handling leads both students and scholars to seek and pursue utilities and amass knowledge to support institutions, administrations, and other departments, regardless of any moral consideration. So again, educational process becomes devoid of morality. What is it? It's another form of investment. How can we keep our institution running? How can it becomes like a supply and demand? We might be even developing courses to cater for students who want to study these courses. And we reduce as much as we can the requirements of graduation so that we produce as many students as we can. So we become attractive to the masses. What happens here is that the authority that is supposed to lead the transformation in society takes a back seat, and the masses inform the authority, inform the educational process on how to function. And we don't realize that now we have this issue of scholars in need of validation from the masses. The masses validate certain scholars and invalidate other scholars. So Habib Abu Bakr continues and he says, a selected teacher ends up teaching a specific subject with a specific curricular targets within limited time. Even inside the school, he faces different personalities, changing circumstances and ideologies which he's not equipped for nor the time to deal with. Students come from different backgrounds, with different traumas, different issues, challenges, problems, different stuff fed into their minds. And they're going to spend 45 minutes with the teacher. They don't even have enough time to ask a question and get a proper answer from the teacher. But in a proper traditional environment, the student will have ample time to discuss and debate, and the teacher convince him. Very interestingly and very beautifully put that Rabi' ibn Sulaiman al-Muradi relates this amazing story about his teacher Shafi'i. And he said, Shafi'i explained something one day, and he could see that I didn't understand. So he repeated, and he kept repeating, 10 times he repeated it. And he said, in the end, I still didn't understand, but I was embarrassed to say that I didn't understand. So I just kept my silence. And he waited, continued the class, and when people left, he said, stay behind, I want to talk to you. And he took me to the corner of the masjid, and he explained it another 40 times. Nowadays, if you have a question to a teacher, he will say, I'll see you tomorrow. I'll see you next time. So that ample opportunity of interaction. And imagine, not only that Shafi'i explains this to Rabi', but Rabi' is highlighting the patience of Shafi'i. If a student asks his teacher to explain something 3 times nowadays, he'll say, what? What's wrong with you? Are you stupid or something? Do you have an issue? Do you have ADHD? Or do you have what? Why are you not focusing with me? What's wrong with you? Isn't it? And we'll start like throwing things at people. So when we see a teacher giving his time, giving his dedication, he teaches the student to be patient, to respect people's different abilities of understanding. So the biggest challenge that faces us today is the scarcity of men who are able to give that mentorship and tarbiyah in our educational process, as they have received it from the old, men of the old. Because what happens is the modern men who are very angry, they teach men who are more angry than them, and they send them on missions to convert or kill. Or if they don't kill, at least they brand you heretic, heterodox. They brand you out of the faith, and then that just creates more and more confusion to the young generations. And here I just wanted to kind of share, I'm not going to explain any of this, but I wanted to share a few sayings of Imam Ahmed Zarruq, Qawa'id al-Tasawwuf, which is really an interesting book, because he doesn't only touch on the maxims of the Tasawwuf, but it's ways of understanding the ulum generally. Zarruq rahimahullah ta'ala says, in the diversity of ways, there is ease for the travelers. That basically confirms what I said before, that in the diversity of ways, في اختلاف الطرائق تسهيل على السالكين. When there is different ways, it just makes it easy for people, so there is no traffic jam in any of them. And in the diversity of madhabs, in the diversity that the tradition provides for us, it just makes people's life easier. It gives them so many choices. Soon, when people realize that they have only 1 or 2 options, they will feel the unease in their hearts. Seeking something from its genuine sources makes it achievable. Makes it achievable. If you have a question about medicine and you go to a person who sells the medicine, he will say, I just said it. Possibly you find the answer in the pharmacy next door. You go from pharmacy to pharmacy. The best thing is to go to the company that has produced this medicine, to the person who has made that composition, has put it together. So seeking something from its sources makes it achievable. So that's a justification for tradition. Why do I need to study madhabs? Because it makes it achievable. I mentioned something that I didn't complete earlier, that one of our teachers was talking about how people used to deny madhabs. And then after all of these years, many people who used to deny madhabs, they ended up recognizing that we need madhabs, unfortunately. So in the recent years, many people who denied madhabs for decades, they started reintroducing madhabs. Nowadays, madhabs are being taught in places which used to deny the madhab. But when they realized that they need the madhab to solve the problems, they didn't realize also that they lack the tools of understanding the books of the madhabs. Because if you say, we don't need these books to solve our problems, okay, leave them aside. So you don't read them. You just take everything from where? From the Quran and the Sunnah. Well, the Quran and the Sunnah have limitation in text. So they can't give you a detailed answer for everything. Okay, now I realize that I have to fix my car. Now I realize that I have been, and unfortunately the solution lies in that very thing that I have put aside for so long. So they will send the little ones, go and get these books that we have neglected for so long, let's look them up and find the solution. But by the way, these books do not contain the solutions either. You know what do? They empower you to find the solution yourself. They don't have a solution. It's not Aladdin's lamp. It is not something that you will scratch and then a little genie will come out and say, haram, leave me alone. No, these books empower the scholars to find the solution. Basically, they give you the genius mentality, the creative mentality that will be able to relate what is theoretical to what is practical, and from that you produce the solution. It teaches you the mechanism, not the solution. Now, in order to read these books, unfortunately, you need the specialists who tell you how to read a book. Because remember, reading is art. Just like anything else, you have to learn it. If you don't learn it, your reading process will be like driving in the wrong side of the road. You will have an accident sooner or later, even if there is no traffic. If you don't get into an accident, the traffic officer will catch you and give you a big fine. So what happened is, when they discovered that these books are there and they tried to find the solutions through them, they realized that no, even reading these books is very difficult. Just reading a paragraph from a marginalia, from a gloss, just spending some time reading a hasha, Zakaria al-Ansari or Tardir or anybody else from those people, takes time. Takes time, and you have to unlock every sentence and see what is the discussion that lies behind this. So they realized that they are disabled. I don't mean disabled physically, but they have disabled themselves by switching off the process of learning. And it is too late to learn this because it takes a life. So seeking something from its genuine sources makes it achievable. Training oneself and pushing it gradually makes objective easy to achieve. And this is why the tradition is so important, because the tradition doesn't give you a small capsule course of medicine that you swallow and then you become an alim. It's an ongoing learning process. You study and you continue to study and you continue to study and you continue to discover how much you have missed in your life. So training yourself gradually. Imagine if someone never practices any sports and then they told him, you either lose weight or you'll have a problem, medical problem. He decides to cut all the things that he used to eat before. And he started to push himself to doing push-ups and do all sorts of sport. What will happen? He might damage himself. So One of the things that tradition teaches us is that we take things bit by bit. They say أول الغيث قطرة. The first thing of the rain is a drop. It's a drop and then it starts raining. When you study, you don't study 24 hours a day. But you dedicate yourself an hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, and then you keep going like that. You accelerate from 1 to 6 or to 4 speed. Perfecting the way of seeking enables you to achieve your purpose. Again, perfecting the tools. When someone asks, why do traditional scholars insist on teaching us grammar and this and this and this and that and spending too much time? What's wrong with you? Like he keeps saying to us, ضرب زيد عمرا, ضرب زيد عمرا, ضرب زيد عمرا. Zayd has been hitting Amr for the last 1500 years. What's wrong with it? What has Amr done to be beaten in the books of grammar or letter? Possibly Amr has made a sin that he has not committed the tawbah for. If he comes to our Friday lecture, he will know how to make a good tawbah. So, why do we need to study grammar and sarf and all of these things? Because these things enable you, perfect your ability to achieve what you want later on. So we have ulumul ala, or what we call ancillary sciences, the sciences that are tools for something else. They are like screwdriver and spinner. You take them and you learn how to use them and you learn how to master using them in order to be able to unscrew and open and dismantle motor, that's the text, and deal with the text at very intricate level. So what does tradition offer us? What do we have for you today? Right? What do we have for you today? You know, everyone makes an offer in the end. So what offer do we have for you today? We don't have an offer to claim ourselves that we are the owners of truth, nothing but truth, and the absolute truth. No. We have an offer to gather the sections of the Ummah on religious common grounds without anathematizing and or flattering anyone. We have an offer of inclusivity. The tradition is offering Muslims today to be inclusive. Can we just work together? You call yourself this, I call myself this, or you want to call me this, no problem. Let's leave our titles at home. And let's walk together. One of the Iraqi scholars said something that I always repeat. He says, Adab knows no madhab. Good character knows no madhab, no religion either. You might meet someone who's of excellent character, and you ask him, what religion do you practice? And he says, I'm an atheist. Fine. If you are a follower of a tradition, you will learn to respect people for who they are and leave what they have between them and God. إن الذين آمنوا والذين هادوا والنصارى والمجوس والذين أشركوا. Those who believe, the Jews, Christians, Zoroastrians, polytheists, إن الله يفصل بينهم يوم القيامة. Allah will judge between them on the day of judgment. The second part of the ayah does not say they should debate with each other. They should try to find the truth. Everyone talks. Inclusivity. Adopting the principle of moderation with awareness. We need to understand very importantly, as followers of tradition, as scholars, as well as students, that there are so many traps. Really, there are so many traps. It is called the trap of destroying the pillars of the society. People had trust in their elders, had trust in families, had trust in principle, have trust in scholars. What has happened? I'm not saying that scholars are infallible, but since everyone has mistakes, you cannot just highlight the mistakes and leave the rest. What has happened is in the past 20 years, and it is going on, this trust has been shaken, that the scholars are entrapped to fall into an area or to side with a group of people, and that is used against them. So what happens is the masses lose trust and respect for the scholar. So we have to adopt the principle of moderation with awareness. Moderation with awareness will make us be moderate in our judgment of a scholar who makes a mistake. When when we are aware that this scholar has served the deen for 50 years. So his service of the deen for 50 years does not exempt him from being mistaken, but his mistake doesn't cancel 50 years of service. You see that? So you disagree with a scholar on his political position. Fine. Politics is based on benefits and harms. And that's the area where human beings will differ the most. You possibly establish the principle that I should get to the lecture early even if I overspeak. Another says, no, I would like to respect the law and stay within the speed even if I get to the lecture late. You cannot say to that person whom you disagree with, if he's the driver, you open the door and push him out of the car. Both of you will have an accident, right? So we should employ this principle, being moderate with awareness, balance, helping in the building of societies and engaging in activities that promote peace. Because this society we build together, this society we live in together, when the society is in trouble, trouble does not distinguish between Muslims and non-Muslims, between Muslims who are traditional and Muslims who are not traditional. They say troubles knock every door without marking any, without saying, no, I'm not going to this street because this street has got good people. Tazkiyah as a means of excellence and as a moral alternative to heated activism and futile pessimism. We have two types of problems today. We have heated activism, and I'll mention in a bit that one of the challenges that face traditional Islam from within is the relation between activists and scholars. Activists have not got the enough knowledge that they need for their activism. Scholars might be in certain places out of touch with reality. But what happens is activists want the scholars to twist the religion to reality. And scholars want the activists to leave the reality completely. What if they meet halfway? Scholars say to the activists, why don't you come and study? And you continue your activism. And activists say to the scholars, you continue searching for new solutions. And if you disagree with us in the end, we still respect you. So we will not say, he was my teacher, but not anymore. He was my teacher, but I don't want to know him anymore. That will disappear. So tazkiyah as a means of excellence and as a moral alternative to the heated activism and futile pessimism. Oh, we're doomed. There is no hope. Difference of opinion handled through dialogue. When there is difference of opinion, there is problems, there is something that we want to discuss, it has to be handled within dialogue, not through debate. You disagree with someone, you declare a challenge. I challenge you to come and debate with me. And then you make a poster and post it in every message, in every YouTube channel. And then you say, you see, he disappeared. He cannot debate with me. Through dialogue, ethical and intellectual discourse within their respective circles. So talks and discussions about certain things should remain in the middle. So what are the challenges facing the scholars? Unfortunately, this is the only picture that I found of a scholar. He's a bit of outdated. Anyway, the first challenge that faces the tradition from within is fashionizing the tradition. My wife hates me creating English words. So this was fashionalizing, and then I had to cut it down to fashionizing. And she said, well, both are wrong, but fashionizing is different. You understand what I mean, right? It's what matters. Everything needs creativity, even English language. Even though I'm not English, English is not my mother tongue. But no problem, you can still introduce to the non-mother tongue something. So fashionizing, that's basically making tradition a fashion. So many people today who fall within the circles of tradition, who adopt a specific way, perspective of life, I don't want to be more obvious than this, they restrict the practice in the attire, in how you dress, or the group that you have, or the circles that you are with, the websites that you visit, the individuals that you associate with. And that is a problem. Why is it a problem? Because it makes us more fragmented. So even within the traditional school, there are fragments. And if we have a mission of combining the ummah, bringing them together, then we don't want to fragment them. Another form of fashionizing is making tradition look like a cultural celebration. So it becomes like an entertainment. So nowadays, if you're invited by a specific institution to attend a traditional, oh, it will be a traditional dance, right? Have you heard of the traditional dance? Traditional dance, Sufi dance. Have you heard of it? You must have heard of that. It's all over the internet. So Sufi dance, right? How can people be Sufi and dance? Unless they're dancing with their spirit. Or a night of spiritual ecstasy. Well, you can't have an ecstasy and spirituality at the same time. You're either ecstatic or you're spiritual. Spirituality makes you awake, ecstasy makes you drunk. So that's a fashion. That's a watering down. That's the second challenge, watering down. So when we say tradition is about the system of ijazah, people think that the system of ijazah is just a title that replaces the poor system of education that we have today, just in the title. Like that guy in Vancouver, Canada, who had a meat shop right next to a Muslim meat shop, and another guy who was not Muslim. And the area was kind of heavily populated by Muslims. So after every Salat al-Jum'ah, Muslims would go and shop for the meat of the week. So this non-Muslim didn't understand. The guy had like Mukhtar Halal meat. So the other guy called it Joan Halal pork. He thought that the word halal is the brand. So we have something called ijazah, right? We think that ijazah is a brand. But ijazah means I permit you, I say that you are now qualified to carry out what you have taken from me. And by the way, this is not something that you can seek. It is something that's conferred upon you, something that's given. When I see that you're mature, you never hear your pot on the cooker saying, I am now cooked, can you remove me? You make a decision. Now this water has reached the boiling temperature. I can move it away. Now this water can kill germs. Seeking knowledge and graduating from a process of knowledge is like reaching the level, reaching the temperature, boiling temperature, where knowledge has killed all the spiritual and physical germs that you have as a student. So once you have reached that level, your teacher says, now you can move on, you clean now. All the germs that you have come with as a seeker of knowledge have been killed. First of these germs is your own ego. So, third one is the activist scholar dilemma, and I think we talked about that a minute ago. There are three challenges that face the tradition from outside. And that is what the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in the hadith. He said, يَرِثُ هَذَا الْعِلْمَ مِنْ كُلِّ خَلَفٍ عُدُولُ. In every generation, the most upright, the most balanced will inherit this knowledge. But those most upright, most balanced will face three challenges, three different groups, three different approaches. Approach number one, the Prophet described them as تَحْرِيفُ الْغَالِينَ, the twisting of extremes. An extremist, ghali is a person who has ghulu. Ghulu is to be extreme in your perspective, very narrow-minded. Remember that this is a psychological problem, as I said earlier. When someone is twisted, is very narrow, rigid in his mentality, that's a psychological problem. But this psyche wants to justify itself. How can it justify itself? It will have to use religion to justify itself. Like KKK, they had agenda against immigrants and non-white people, but they couldn't claim legitimacy. So they needed a Bible to create a Bible that serves their purpose. How? The Bible wouldn't, because by its nature, it's for peace. So they had to select and twist and do certain things. Harrafa means to move something from its place. Remove this word and add this word. remove this letter and add this letter. So those are intentionally changing individuals who work with the texts. But there is another group. So the ulama will work hard, the scholars will work hard to clear the tradition from the twisting. Imagine if something has been twisted for so long. And what do? Every time they twist something, you walk and untwist it. Untwist it. That's very meticulous and very difficult job. Because how much damage they will create in the ummah? And how much efforts will it need to save the ummah from that? And then the second group, already working, they have something called arrogation. To arrogate means to claim something that you're not qualified for. To adopt something. You know when someone is not a doctor and then he wears a white coat and then he pretends that he's a doctor. So that's arrogation. Arrogation of who? Of invalidators. Certain people who do not want to stick to the rules and regulations of the faith. It is too limiting for them, too restricting for their liberal ideas. So what do? They can't just speak from no pulpit, so they need a pulpit. But they are not qualified for a pulpit. So they make a pulpit for their own. So he becomes, or she becomes, or they become the expert in Islam. Or Professor so-and-so who is a head of department such and such in such and such university, and he's a specialist in Islam. Well, by the way, again, that person has studied that little dot of knowledge in his PhD. So all he knows that little thing. He hasn't gone through a training or anything. So he's an arrogator. He has taken something that's not his. But his main purpose is to invalidate. So he will come or she will come. What is the hijab? There is no ayat talking about hijab in the Quran. And the simple masses will just look and say, yes, I heard it from the professor. The professor knows it all. So that's the arrogation of the invalidators. So the scholars keep running around and saying to people, hold tight to your deen. They say hold tight to your deen in two levels. One level is hold tight to your deen, not to the twisting of the extremes. Hold tight to your deen, not to the loosening of the invalidators. And then we have the third group. That's the most interesting one. So the first and the second group are people who are ill-intentioned people. Third group are ignorance. Jahala in Arabic means to have no knowledge. So al-jahil is someone who doesn't know. And because he doesn't know, right? He doesn't know, he just denies everything. You tell him, it's like this. Really? No. He doesn't see anything on the other side of the mountain. So he claims that there is no cross. He can't even crawl to the tip of the mountain. So a person who doesn't know, therefore he is denying. And they say, إِذَا قَلَّ عِلْمُ الْمَرْءِ كَثُرَ إِنْكَارُ. The less knowledge you have, the more denying you will be. Or a jahil is someone who is aggressive. Jahala means to be aggressive. He's aggressive. Why? He takes position and judgment before he even listens to your argument. He quickly hears someone saying something on Facebook and quickly makes a judgment and takes position and builds on that. That's jahl. But there's no jahl as absence of knowledge, even though it's a fruit of it, bitter fruit of it, but it's jahl because he's very aggressive. He's aggressive in his approach. So the ulama will work on the interpretation of the ignorance. Because remember that an ignorant will never claim, will never acknowledge he's ignorant. So he will always find an excuse to interpret something that he doesn't understand. Malik rahimahullah ta'ala says, تعلموا فقه لا أدري. Learn the fiqh of I don't know. When they traveled to him from Iraq, the teachers of Iraq, who were Malikiya at the time, some of them were Malikiya, they came with the questions of their students to Malik. And they presented 40 questions. Malik answered only 6 and he said about another 34, I don't know. قالوا فما نقول? What shall we say? قال قولوا مالك ولا يدري. Malik doesn't know. It's very simple. But nowadays, the most difficult thing is to say, you know what, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I haven't heard this. But no one does that. So those ignorants who do not know, they will try to interpret the texts to make themselves look like someone who knows. As some imams say, it is enough honor of knowledge that those who don't have it claim it. And it is enough vice and debasement in ignorance that those who have it deny it. I think these are too many challenges that face the traditional school. I hope, inshallah ta'ala, that by sharing these ideas and these thoughts and these challenges and these jokes with you, if not that you will try to spread them to others, you will be cautious next time when you read something on Facebook or on Twitter, that you will not judge a scholar. You know that this person is like a surgeon who has to make a decision between cutting someone's limb or losing his life. Jazakumullah khair. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We can differentiate between modern scholarship and traditional scholarship at few levels. Level 1 is the area of interest. So we have modern scholarship that looks at, for example, studying Islamic studies as part of social sciences. So most of these studies are to do with the study of Islam in practice, with the practice of Islam rather than the Sharia of Islam. So if someone, for example, has a PhD in postmodernist Islam in Britain, I should not come with a fiqhi question. Can I buy a house by going to the bank? Can I do this? Is this halal and haram? That person, that's not his area of interest. His area of interest is Islam in postmodernist Britain. So at a level of specialization. In the same way as I cannot go to a linguist and ask him a fiqh question, or to a faqih and ask him a linguist question. Right? So the area of specialization. Secondly, we need to understand that traditional scholarship is based on long time and training. So the quality of it is completely different. It is a tradition that brings together memorization. So a traditionally trained scholar is supposed to have memorized the Quran, memorized a series of texts that sum up the ulum, and then gone through the explanation of them, and so on and so forth. That is different from the free range study of modern scholarship in academia. If you are a university student in any department of Islamic studies or others, most of the time you will have some taught subjects and you will have a lot of assignments to do. So it is more independent research. While in the traditional studies, traditional scholarship, there are three levels. There is level of memorization, there is level of explanation, and there is level of discussion, and there is, at the end, there is something, the Shia studies, they have something called the Bahth al-Kharij. It's like you go out of the class and do some discussions across interdisciplinary discussions. So the time, in terms of time, traditional scholarship is more time consuming and it is more rigorous. While modern scholarship, it is more to do with independence, while the other one is more to do with dependence, because it's a communication of knowledge from one to another, right? And in area of interest or specialization, traditional scholarship is more specialized, but in its specialization it is still wider than modern scholarship. And then there is one last thing that is very different between modern scholarship and traditional scholarship. Traditional scholarship aims not at a degree, it aims at mastership of what is being studied, while modern scholarship aims at a title and a degree. Al-Ghazali was the dean of the Nizamiya University in Baghdad, but we never call him the dean or the professor. We call him Hujjatul Islam. Why was Al-Ghazali of all the titles called Hujjatul Islam, the proof of Islam? Because he was a theologian, and theologians normally use proofs to prove the tenets of Islam.
Anyone else?
Assalamualaikum Syekh. You mentioned that there is no proper teacher-student relationship in schools now. So how do we solve this problem?
Speak to the Minister of Education. I think one of the things that we should do is we need to encourage our children or our youth to try to complement this missed component, and they themselves become the teachers that we desire. So in addition to completing their studies here, they can go away and spend time with teachers. Spend not all the time, not long time. They can spend time, they can take dosages and come back, because the ilm is still there. That's number one. Number two is that the parents themselves become teachers. So when the parents become teachers, they already have that concern and this love and that care for the children, for their own children. So every parent, when he becomes a teacher, he can complement what is missing in the school.
Anyone else? If not, there is a question here. Okay. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh. How do we tell off people who modernizes Islam in a nice manner when we have to look after traditional Islam?
How do we tell off
People who modernizes Islam in a nice manner when we have to look after traditional Islam.
I have to make a disclaimer or a correction. We have no problem of modernizing Islam. Islam is not against modernizing. Islam is against modernity. And not modernity as modernity, but modernity with a specific definition, which is cutting religion from life. So making life without a purpose and without a background and without aim. Making human beings live only for this life and work only for this life and aim only for the gratification of their desires in this life. So you're basically cutting life from purpose and meaning, which people call secularization. Second thing that religion have a problem with in modernity is subjectivity. We mean by subjectivity that denying that there is absolute truth. When you deny that there is absolute truth and you say everything is subjective, it means there is nothing that I can trust in this world. Gender is not trusted, family is not trusted, a boy doesn't know he is a boy, a girl doesn't know that she's a girl, a family they don't know that they're family. Nothing in the society will be static. And even language will not be static. Family and tradition will not be static. So what will happen is we will end up with individuals. Human society will be broken and fragmented. And thirdly, religion has or faith or Islam will have an issue in modernity in the sense of making man an animal that serves his desires only. So elevating human beings to being human beings. In the industrial world that we live in, human beings only serve their desires. But besides that, if we mean by modernity that we need to have cleaner streets, then faith promotes cleanliness. If we mean by that we have to move the children from old buildings to new school buildings and give them access to technology, no problem. But giving children access to technology before they even know the difference between the right hand and the left hand, they will say that's wrong. Even any sane person will say that this is wrong. Only insane individuals or people who don't care will just continue with that and say this is freedom. Religion does not agree with using big words out of their context. When you mean by freedom and you say everyone is free, reality is no. Absolute freedom is not real. You're not free to drive as you wish on the road. You're not free to go to any other country without carrying your passport. You're not free to put your loudspeaker at the highest volume in the middle of the night. You're not free to litter anywhere. And I'm just mentioning very silly and superficial examples. But you are not free. I am not free. You are not free to say what you just want to say. There is something called libel law. You'll get into trouble. So absolute freedom of human beings is a lie. But people believe it. So as Muslims, we are free. But we understand that our freedom is designed and is decided and is planned and is part of a system. So my freedom would stop at a certain point, because otherwise that freedom would become what? Chaos. In Arabic they say, Al-Fadila, a virtue, is wasatun bayna radilatayn, is a middle between two vices. You either so stingy or you so spendthrift. But generosity is the middle. You're either coward or you're hasty. And bravery is in the middle. So virtue is in the middle. And middle is the fitra. This is what you have as a human being. If you tire yourself every single day, you will be bored. And if you play all the time, you will also be fed up. Religion tells you take this and take that. This is what tradition has to offer. This is what tradition has a problem with. It has a problem with the no boundaries of the world that we live in. Globalization, in reality, is not globalization. It is technically carrying a specific Western culture and forcing every other culture and civilization to assimilate to it. We can have a very long discussion about that. Think about fast food, right? How is fast food restaurants cancel our identity as human beings? You go into a fast food restaurant, you just request a number, right? I want meal number 5. You've got limited choices. It cancels your identity and makes you into a digit. You are already a digit. A password on your phone, a password in your bank, a password in your hotel, a password in your this, a password in that. You are already a number. And one problem with numbers is that they are rigid. They are different from vernacular, from the language. The language is human. Allah did not say وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَرْقَامَ كُلَّهَا. He taught Adam all the numbers. He didn't teach him 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But what did he teach him? Al-asma'a kullaha, the names. So that he distinguishes identities and entities, not categorize. Numbers are abstract. Religion teaches you the abstract and teaches you the real. Another thing about the tradition that faces this globalization is that globalized food restaurants just make our local businesses run out of business. Make our mothers not needed anymore. Make you not appreciative of your mother's food, of your wife's food. Yes, it gives them a space not to cook, which is possibly a great thing. But it comes with massive amount of calories and diseases, and it breeds in us consumerism. Because when your mom cooks or your wife cooks, she cooks exactly what you need. But when you go and buy, the person behind the counter doesn't know how much you eat. He's just got a standard size. A meal that is made out of home is similar to an old size cap. You know, when you go and get it's one size hat. It fits a child as much as it fits the person. It cancels our differences as human beings, and it cancels our very humanity as individuals. It makes us completely zombies, that everyone looks exactly the same. So religion does not have a problem with modernization and change. The Prophet ﷺ, I taught a course, my last visit, the civil city of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ was very creative. He redesigned Medina and made it very active. He sent the Sahaba to learn new talents. Our tradition, the traditional world that we're talking about, is full of inventions, right? 1001 inventions Muslims have added to the history of civilization. So who says that we're not modern? Habib Abu Bakr al-Mashhur has a very interesting interpretation of an ayah. وَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ Haddatha in Arabic means to speak, and also to meet means to modernize. So this is وَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ means by the blessing of your Lord, when you acknowledge the blessing of your Lord, the blessing of mind, the blessing of talent, renew your life, modernize it. So we have no problem with modernization. What we have a problem with is chaos in the guise of freedom, assimilation in the guise of globalization. I have written extensively about that in my PhD, about one of the problems of modernity is that it is European. It's a Eurocentric thing. It grew up in Europe, and it was like a missionary work being sent to America. The European man thought that I'm ahead of everyone, and I'm going to teach these Americans, these indigenous Americans, how to be humans, because they are primitive beings. We have never heard the word primitive being in Islam, right? We have never heard in the history of Islam that indigenous people were kept in cages and treated like animals, and they were subjected to people to come and look around as if they are in a zoo. But this is what happened with the Aboriginals in Australia. Islam did not cancel a whole race of humanity in any country that it went to. In fact, it empowered the local people. Yes, there were injustices. I'm not saying that our culture and our history is free from injustice. There was injustice. But that injustice of humans never managed to change the face of the faith. Scholars continued to promote the faith and say to those people, you are wrong. That was the preservation of the faith. The faith was preserved, that the impurity did not manage to contaminate the sources of clean water. But what has happened, Western civilization has lost its reference point. And this is the reality of Muslims today, that Muslims are losing their reference point. And when they lose their reference point, they will pray south while they're supposed to pray north. They think that their prayer is valid, but their prayer is not valid. And by the way, Muslims today depend on navigation. Back in the days, at least, they had some form of communication with the universe, they could find their direction. What has modern life done to us? It has disconnected us from the universe, and at the same time left us with a small toy called navigation. Once we lose it, we lost, right? People nowadays, if they drive around with some GPS and it switches off, they will be stuck, right?
There's a lot of questions here, but we have to choose this one because he or she messaged twice. So I'm so sorry if I never get the question first. Okay, so the question is, with regards to looking at people's worth in their productivity, how should we welcome in their productivity? How should we welcome artificial intelligence into society, and what is the right and healthy narrative when dealing with our careers and of others?
That's a very good question. Not because I have the answer to it, but because I have a student who works in artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, just like other areas of modern science, is still subject to testing and trying and testing. So there are no absolute answers about it. That student of mine, thanks to him, he showed me how difficult it is to make a robot make a cup of tea. It's very, very difficult. So if a husband says to his wife, can I have my cup of tea? She knows exactly how dark or light the tea should be, how hot or not hot the water should be, how much milk to add, and what exactly he needs at that moment. That's a human thing. With an artificial intelligence, this is to be translated to loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of information that is to be put in. Such a small decision, like making a cup of tea, takes the work of hundreds of people who will need to translate. When I say, I want a cup of tea that is strong but not very strong, remember that the vernacular language has to be translated for artificial intelligence into numbers. So you're basically restricting that which is wide, which is flexible, which is free. you're restricting something that is relaxed. And for you to condense it in a digit and put it, the digit might not be representative all the time. Now, putting that aside, and putting aside the fact that all of this is an area of exploration, we haven't yet discussed what about the decisions made by the artificial intelligence. If a robot, for example, is helping a physician in the surgery, and it makes a mistake, as I was sharing with some brothers and sisters in Pragas the other day, to what extent can this robot be responsible for the mistake it makes in the surgery room? Can we trust its decisions? Put that aside. And then a third question, I'm just brainstorming with you. Third question is, it's called what's it? Artificial intelligence. So it's not natural intelligence. It empowers human beings to think that they are God. One of the most perplexing challenges that face human beings is understanding our own brains, isn't it? Why? It's our control room. If your control room controls you, how can you understand the dynamism of it? One of the most difficult areas of surgery today is brain surgery, right? It's very, very difficult. When you are a neurosurgeon and you have something to do with the brain, it becomes it's a very detailed and meticulous area of medicine. So we as human beings don't know how do we function. How can we then claim that we have reached the zenith of understanding and unlocking the details and the tiny details and the fine details of the system, and now we are giving it to somebody else? We have to be God ourselves. And by the way, this idea is being sold to people through media. All of these films, American films, that sell to people that this person has become God, or this person is managing the world or running the world and stuff like that. It is pushing to people the idea that I control the world. And human beings are very good in making claims. One of those claims is, I can solve everything. We don't even know how to treat cancer, can we? Do we? Just a couple of days ago, there was an article somewhere that they have finally discovered something, the medicine for flu, for common cold. How they are going to attack certain proteins in the cells, and by attacking these proteins, they will be able to reverse the outcome of common cold. Such a little thing that makes you asleep and bedridden for 5 days. And you say, and I say, I'm going to give intelligence to something else to act and function just like me. I have a very interesting interpretation of an ayah in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ نُعَمِّرْهُ نُنَكِّسْهُ فِي الْخَلْقِ. Warsh reads, وَمَنْ نُعَمِّرْهُ نَنْكُسْهُ فِي الْخَلْقِ. If we give you a long life, we push you down in power. When someone reaches the age of 70 or 80 or 90, they become very fragile. That's for individuals, but for the life of nations as well. If a nation lives for so long, if humanity lives for so long, humans will be degraded to a level that they will make something that leads them. So it's our own creation, which is lower than us, and because we have put ourselves down, it will control us. So in reality, as a humanity, as a human race, we have been lowered in creation. And you can see that. Human beings now, if everything in the world is controlled by these machines, that they can read human intelligence, that they can read human decisions and emotions and this and that. And these are emotionless. They are faithless. They have no boundaries. There is no akhirah for them, right? There is no Jannah and Nar. There is no conscience that is going to stop them from abusing their power. You can make a human being fear Allah, and therefore he changes his decision. But how are you going to tell the robot, if you don't treat me well, you will burn in hell? I was saying to the sisters and brothers the other day, if a robot makes a mistake, how are you going to punish it? Switch it off, take it off, unplug it from electricity for 5 years? These are just questions. This area of science is just an open area. What we are deceiving ourselves into believing, that there are decisive answers here. No, there are no decisive answers in this area of science yet. The difference between science and scientism is making science into a belief, into faith, and believing in science. And that is hypocritical if you make science into a faith, because you say the scientific method tells me that I have to keep researching and changing my research outcomes based on my research. And now you decide to say that evolution is a fact. Evolution is a belief. Then you will kill me if I don't believe in evolution. And evolution hasn't been confirmed yet. Evolutionists themselves say that they have just discovered some apes or something in Ethiopia a few weeks ago that has completely destroyed the theory of the original claims of evolution. Wallahu a'lam.
So you have time for one more question? Okay. So this will be the last question, I think. The question is, Bismillah, how to reply to those who always try to contextualize the text of the Quran and Hadith while it's important to sustain our tradition?
If we try to contextualize it, that's not a problem if we want to contextualize it. But I need to understand or highlight just a little point, that my contextualization of the text is my attempt of restricting it. So that's not infallible. That's fallible. Some years ago, many years ago, some people in the Arab world kept saying Islam is the solution. Yes, Islam is the solution, true. But your understanding of Islam is not Islam. It's your own version of understanding Islam. Your contextualizing of the text is understanding the text with the lens of today. But possibly the text gives another perspective tomorrow. The Quran says, ثُلَّةٌ مِّنَ الْأَوَّلِينَ وَثُلَّةٌ مِّنَ الْآخِرِينَ. We need to remember that humanity moves forward, it doesn't move backward. And since it moves forward, it's like a river. The river takes the color, the smell, and the shape of the new area that it goes into. So if we are going to contextualize a text, that's absolutely fine. If this contextualization is done by a scholar, then he has chosen the right contextualization. Otherwise, it will be like picking up a photo and putting it in the wrong frame. Either a small frame or a big frame. So if a scholar looks at the photo and says, this is the right frame, but this photo, if put in a different house, you might need a completely different color of a frame. You might need a metal frame. So our contextualizing of the text is our reading of that text. His reading glasses are different from my reading glasses, different from your reading glasses. You need a reading glass at certain time of your life, and then later on in your life you might need a bigger size, depending on how weak your eyesight will become. So contextualizing the text is part of the tradition, as long as it's carried by the qualified and it is not an absolutist.
On that note, we will end the session here. So thank you, Shaykh, for this enlightening and insightful session, and thank you for your questions. May Allah bless you, Shaykh, and continue to bless us with your presence and guidance. For those who would like to contribute directly from Shaykh, we still have talks on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Do join us. There are still slots available, and we'd like to use this opportunity to thank Pergas for the support. Pergas in turn will be hosting the former Grand Mufti of Egypt, Sheikh Ali Jum'ah, who happens to be one of our Sheikh's esteemed teachers, in mid-October. May Allah continue to bless Singapore with the enriching presence of scholars, turning us from spiders and ants into bees, inshallah. Thank you again. So on that note, we will end with Tasbih Kafara and Salat Asr. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.